So I want to introduce Alex real quick. I actually met Alex when I lived in Portland, which we're going to be moving back to that area here this upcoming April. So I'm excited we'll actually get to hang out a little bit more. But I met Alex. I reached out to him through LinkedIn. It was like, hey, dude, we're both kind of doing the same stuff. You want to meet? And this was like in 2016 when I was just getting Blissful Prospecting started. It was actually before we started the company. And Alex was gracious enough to kind of take me through the ropes of what kind of email tools I should be using, what we should be using to get data, how we should be sending stuff. And he was really helpful in that way. And we have him on today because we're talking about LinkedIn. And Alex, if you haven't heard of him, he's the CEO and founder of RevenueZen. And he works with a team of 10 strategists based in Portland who are all passionate about sales development and brand marketing. He's doing some really cool stuff. And he's on a mission to help B2B companies grow their awareness and impact thoughtfully and powerfully. Alex, what's up, man? Good to have you on the tour.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. It's good to see you again in this context, and I appreciate so much being your guest.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited to have you on. And this is a topic that a lot of people want to know about and that we haven't really talked about on the tour much. So I'm excited to dig into this, but they're kind of an icebreaker that I think will be kind of fun. The talk is how to slide into your prospects' DMs. Usually that's kind of a reference with like dating, right? Or like on Instagram or whatever. How close would you say is, or if there are any similarities in your eyes, is prospecting on LinkedIn versus online dating? And by the way, I do not condone any man that hits on a woman or vice versa on LinkedIn. So I don't mean it in that way. That's obviously a really messed up thing to do. And I'm glad those people are starting to get publicly shamed. So not in that way, but what kind of similarities do you see between the two?
I mean, I think the one that's the least douchey, because I've had sales managers use those analogies to train sales, and it's just like
Yeah.
it's pretty gross.
Yep.
But the one that is the most just accurate is like focus on gauging interest.
Yeah.
Like not trying to create it, but gauging it. Just measure, just where
Mhm.
is it? Where is their interest level? And then not being more than one notch above their interest level. And that goes for anybody. It's just like a principle of human connections. Like try to be roughly as interested, maybe plus or minus one step than somebody else. And if you're like plus five, you're going to be too pitchy or too pushy or either one of those things. So that's my biggest tip for people is gauge interest.
No, I love that. And that's I met my wife on Tinder, which you know, Sarah, and I've kind of talked about that a little bit, but it is kind of interesting to look at it in that way in terms of like any type of communication with someone that you don't know that's like hasn't really, like I get on Tinder, for example, someone kind of opts into that. But on LinkedIn, they're not necessarily opting in to receive your pitch, right? They haven't connected and accepted your connection request to say, Alex, yeah, tell me all about your product or service. So let's kind of start there. Like you mentioned this gauging interest piece. What is like when we look at the 1,000-foot view of what's going on LinkedIn right now, what do you feel like is like going wrong? Like how are people like just in general from what you're seeing, like what are people doing wrong?
I mean, the big thing that's happening that now that I think has been, it's like a crescendo into this over time is people have more information than ever, and yet we're still treating it like salespeople are the gatekeepers of information. So
Yeah.
back in the day, so to speak, when salespeople were gatekeepers of information, prospects couldn't look anything up. You did kind of have to like get to the point and share your features because that was new information to them. And now the new information is teaching people to be better at their jobs. And
Yeah.
if you're in any kind of sales, you have way more information about that than you think. Like you work with so many people, you're better networked in their industry than your prospects are. That's like a cool superpower that people don't realize they have, and they're not using it. Um, they're not really doing too much like casual talking about how other people are doing stuff better in a way that isn't, super high level or filled with jargon. And so what they're doing instead is they're just like building mass lists with automation tools and just hitting the button. Um, and honestly, like there isn't anything inherently wrong with automation, but automation just scales something that needs to work initially. So if it doesn't work in the first place, you're just scaling crap. So like, don't do that. Um, and so what you can do is teach people stuff, even one small thing, and just like arouse a little bit of intrigue. And that's kind of what to do instead. But the thing that's wrong is people are just treating it as like either a resume, which is just boring and dry, or they're treating it as like a pitch platform, which is also not correct. So yeah, we can evolve, and it'll be more fun when you do it in that new way. Like it's way more fun to be on LinkedIn, and you also have better results when you focus on just like dropping little tidbits and being like the most interesting person in the world at the cocktail party, but in your, LinkedIn professional niche, right? So if you just do that, you'll win. Easier said than done.
I love what you said, teaching people to be better at their jobs. Do you find that, like when you guys are working with people and the work that you've done just with folks on LinkedIn, do you find that people are almost a little bit afraid of like, hey, am I experienced enough to teach this prospect who's spent 20 years in the industry something new when I'm an SDR or BDR or any other kind of sales rep that's been doing it for a couple years? Is that ever an insecurity? It's an insecurity I would have. But do you ever, hear that? And what would you say to someone like that might be feeling that?
Actually, people who've been in the industry for 20 years often know they're high level enough that they haven't been in the trenches in a while. Mm-hmm. And so they don't necessarily know all the trenches stuff. And they're the ones insecure because they don't know the trenches stuff anymore. I've been a CMO for 25 years. Oh, cool. Have you run digital ads lately? Not for 18 years, right?
Yeah.
And when I was running them, they weren't even really digital. So shit, right? And that's not necessarily the case everywhere, but think about like, a manufacturing executive. Have they inspected frontline tech recently? Do they know what's happening? Are they using machine vision to inspect stuff? Maybe not, but humans can only know a certain amount of things. And you being an SDR salesperson, all you need to do is know a lot about one little thing and then how that one little thing connects to everything else. And then a smart executive of any type should see that and be like, oh, so here's what you think they might be doing. Not you, like here's what people think they might be doing. People think that they need the SDR to be a better CMO or VP of operations than they are. That's not what they need. All they need is to see you as a source of one piece of new information. You don't need to be better than them at their whole job, just the one little thing that you're good at, right? So but I'm gonna look for a example in the chat. Let's see, a wingman for sales teams. That's one I saw. I know that that's wingman, so cool. Do you need to be a better VP of sales than the VP of sales you're talking to? No, you don't need to know how to design a sales finance plan, integrate with marketing, give the investor talk. All you need to know is how to improve your manager coaching by this one little bit. VP of sales doesn't need you to be better VP of sales. They just need you to know this little one thing. So rest in your confidence that you can have your little domain and be the master of that. And that's all you need. Don't worry about the rest of the stuff. It's so much easier if you don't try to be good at everything. I'm not particularly good at everything. I run a marketing agency. I'm not particularly good at running paid ad campaigns. Like that seems basic, right? But we have a thriving marketing agency without me doing much paid ad campaigns. Fancy that, right? But I know enough to know how the things that I'm good at connect with the rest of those things. And that's all you need.
Yeah. I mean, I really relate to this because when we, in the last like year and a half, moved more into coaching and training versus doing the prospecting for people, how we started out, running the cold email campaigns, the people I was selling to were now bigger businesses and they were like VPs of sales. And I was very anxious coming in because I'm like, I've never been a VP of sales at a B2B company before. I've done it on the B2C level, like, oh my God. And what they would look at me like is like, it's exactly what you said, not to do their job better, but how can you help enable my team? Because you know what should go in that subject line to get a higher open rate. You're on the ball when it comes to how to handle objections or make help my reps feel more confident on the phone. So it's like you're bringing your little slice of the pie in there. I love that, man. And one little quick thing, you guys, because I see some folks asking questions, make sure to use the Q&A button in Zoom. Ask your questions in there and it'll kind of filter them out so we can get to them a little bit better. So let's talk about this teaching people. One thing that we talked about prior to this, I was like, we have this product language that a lot of people use. They talk about their product and you hear features and benefits, right? I see that in a lot of messaging on LinkedIn. And then where I see another big focus is on problems. This is something that we do a lot. And I think the problem with talking about problems all the time is it's really hard. It's hard to engage the companies that are doing really well that still want outside help if you talk about their problems, because their problems, like the pain points, are not as big, right? And then you talk about a third thing altogether, like subject matter and how to talk more high level about like the industry versus like the problems or that individual. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? I think this will give people like kind of a good, like, how do I approach this teaching thing?
Yeah. And then this is something that Jordan Greek, you just mentioned, is like, how do you, when you find yourself being sold to, what is your favorite response back? So in the last 3 days, I turned somebody selling to me into a pretty solid 2K a month proposal, like pretty small one, but still like a decent thing. And it was legit. It wasn't like they were obnoxious, but I like soft, like pulled their response in and then put it back out. And we had a chat about their stuff. I'm going to share my screen and show you a couple examples of that in action. I'm actually going to start with one where I didn't want to sell to them because he was just being annoying. And so you'll see what I mean by this. So this is also a big example of like what not to do, right? So this is a pretty common example of a connection request. And, some variant of this is kind of hard to refuse if you want to network because they're not making their intentions clear. So if you're a person who gives people benefit of the doubt, you're like, all right, sure, we'll see what you got, right? And then, like, if you hit accept, and then later you get the probably automated response, right, or the follow up. And so, and I know I'm like kind of calling people out, but I figure may as well just show you under the hood. Like, I'm not going to show you screenshots. This is just my actual Chrome browser, so. You're getting the real stuff. But this person is trying to teach. Good for him, right? So how is he getting the teaching wrong? Well, the dude's a CPA, so I imagine he knows a lot about this stuff. But he says, I'm curious if you're taking advantage of the new tax law changes that occurred in 2020. My clients prior to meeting didn't understand key credits, saving money on taxes, we're just helping keep things going. Okay, fair enough. But like everybody says that. Here's the first mistake. Don't say things everybody says unless you're going to elaborate in a unique way. So what's my response to him? Which key credits? Crickets, right? Like, if you want to teach me about taxes, I fully believe that you know more about taxes than I do. But my job as the business owner, which is similar to any kind of leader or executive job, is not to know everything about everything, right? My job is not to be a CPA. My job is to find the right CPA and know how to vet them, right? If you're a VP of sales, trying to improve your team, your job is to vet all those pitches to figure out which ones are worth listening to. So that's why when you teach, you have to say something new. And so I'm calling him out here and being like, be specific. Which key credits can help me? You told me about the key credits that people didn't understand. Which ones are they? Come on, I want to know. I want to know the key credits. And I'm legitimately open to hearing about them.
Yeah.
But the problem is he hasn't been specific. Like, he could say, great question. Here's the 5 most common. It would take a short call to figure out which one of these you might be not taking that you could. But here's the 5 most common that apply to agencies. But nothing, right? And so because your prospects are getting all these pitches, the hard thing is to stand out and you have to say a little bit more. So Jordan, that's my favorite response to people like this. And it's also a thing to avoid when prospecting, is teaching them general stuff that they already know.
Can we drill in on that? What's up, Jordan? By the way, he was in one of our boot camps. Can you elaborate more on, so essentially, if I'm understanding you correctly, Alex, this is like, you can talk about the what, but you don't need to talk about the how. That's what you can talk about in a sales call. You don't need to say, here are the 5 tax credits, and oh, by the way, here's the links to the application so you can start this process yourself. Like, you don't need to go that far in depth. Okay, you're nodding. So when I focus on the what, like, how do I find out the like what to share part in terms of what I can teach? And if we could maybe use the example of someone that's working at a big company where they have like a lot of content and case studies and all this stuff, but it might not quite be teed up in the way that they need it to be from a sales standpoint when they're prospecting. How do you how should someone like that think about like what to share, like that part of it?
Yeah, that's one of the problems of marketing producing so much content is
Yeah.
you have to know what's valuable to people. And so this is tricky if you're an SDR. So having never myself been an SDR, I'm just going to speak from the perspective of like, I'm in sales.
Yeah.
I'm looking for things where prospects actually reacted in reality. And they said something like, in particular, I never thought about it that way, or that's interesting, or you started a conversation over here. And I'm just going to rely on those. And those are my main talking points. For example, when I started telling people on calls, yeah, most sales teams think about LinkedIn as a resume, not as a marketing asset. They're just like, what? And they just, right? So I just say that, right? And if you're, no matter what your domain is, like just listen for those things. And if it requires going to Reddit forums or listening to sales calls or whatever it is, or just on your cold calls, listening for the parts where they go, you want like new information discovery, and try to figure out what of the information being presented is at least somewhat new and or controversial, or people haven't thought of it. And so don't share blog posts or case studies without also pointing out what of that was so interesting to you personally. So let me try to look at the examples here. Let's see. Healthcare software, digital solutions, digital payment processor, the Venmo for B2B. All right, I just bought payment processing, or I'm about to sign up for something, so I'll use that as an example. Here's the thing that I didn't know. So someone could outbound me and say, hey, do you want to save 1% on your credit card processing fees? I'd be like, yeah, I'm skeptical. I don't care. No, thanks. They can send me a case study of how somebody else saved, whatever percent. But the problem is I don't believe them because they're not teaching me the reason why that was helpful. So here's the thing that did work. And someone was like, here's how to actually pull the real interchange rates on your Intuit merchant account for each credit card that you accept. And they said, send me the report. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Here's the report. And they said, oh, so what I'm seeing is you have this extra little boosted charge on your interchange rates. I'm not sure what that's about, but the way credit card processing works is you have interchange plus the processor's markup. I was like, okay. I forgot about the idea that Discover is more and blah, blah, blah. So they taught me this new way of thinking about it. And then I was like, all right, now I'm listening. You've defeated my skepticism a little bit. I'm willing to hear what you have to say. So if you send somebody, a blog post or a case study, you can just be like, here was the most interesting thing about it. Or you can just be like a little bit intriguing. So does that answer the question? And then I have an example I'll show of
So essentially what I'm getting from that is that like, it's not good enough to be like, oh, here's a blog post link, go check it out. Like you need to actually formulate a perspective on that. And this is almost kind of dancing in like challenger sale territory. It sounds like where you formulate a perspective on something. Justin Welsh talked about this last week with like personal branding. I thought that was kind of cool. It's like his thing was, pick the areas in which you have very strong opinions that tend to be somewhat controversial. Is there any other, like if you were to share one or two more ideas around like, if I have a marketing department creating content and I have a lot to choose from, like what I might think about to find the stuff that's controversial. And you mentioned like listening to sales calls and like paying attention to like, when are people like, oh, that's interesting, or never thought of it that way. Where can we look for more moments like that when we're thinking about like formulate our own point of view on what we do?
Yeah, I mean, one thing people often don't do here is they're afraid to really get into it. This is a bit even deeper than just like how to look at content. And this is more about how you treat your job and your career. If you treat it just like my job is to come in and do dials, A, that's going to be more boring. And B, you're not going to have that like curiosity to get into the subject matter. If you treat it as a game of just like, however you want to look at it, whether it's a game or it's an intellectual pursuit or whatever it is, you have to truly want to know more about it. So often I find that if you're in sales, you read a company case study, you're going to gloss over most of the stuff, right? You're going to be like, oh, this is just something that'll help me close more deals. Great.
Mhm.
You don't bother to really understand, like, okay, wait a minute. So they came in and they implemented Gong, and then it just sort of skips over the part where they made changes. Like, what do you mean? What actually happened? Who did those changes? What was it like going through it? How did they find time to review all those calls? And like, you got to ask those questions and make sure that you personally understand the nooks and crannies of it. And if you have no curiosity to want to do that, then you're not going to formulate a perspective. The only way to formulate a perspective is to dig deep into one little area. When I was in college, my philosophy professor would always be like, don't write the grand treatise on meta ethics. You don't know enough to do that. Take one thing and just explore it a bunch until you have a 5-page paper on this one little logical point that you found. Do the same thing. If your software is like a new way of inspecting manufacturing lines for defects, then just focus on one little tweak. Maybe it's like that the cameras are on top and the side, and that they capture motion around the object instead of just doing a static from far camera. So if you just ask people like, oh, have you started using dynamic cameras yet? I mean, this company over here has started to do that. Has that entered into the process today?
Yeah.
It's just like casual, just sort of rolls off the tongue. You're just like, you do what I call the cocktail party explanation. The cocktail party explanation or question is you personally asking a normal question or saying something normal that doesn't sound weird to somebody who's a friend and still is substantive, right? So what I just said was that it's just like, have you guys implemented any dynamic or moving cameras instead of a static camera in the past few months? I've noticed some other people are doing the same thing. It's just like, it wouldn't sound weird at a party.
Yeah.
If you can get it to that, then you're on the right track. That's the cocktail party question.
Gotcha. Can we ask everyone a quick question just to kind of gauge like where they're at with this? So in the chat, you guys, what is something you feel like you could teach the prospects that you reach out to? Like hit the chat real quick. Could be one sentence. What is one thing that you can teach them that they might not know or that is a different perspective? Hit the chat real quick. What is one thing that you could teach your prospects? And I think this will give like Alex, probably give you a kind of a good way to look at this to see where people are at.
Okay, so we have how to together wellness initiatives so they work together in concert versus time-sucking silos. Okay, let me expand on one of these. Rob. Okay, Rob Kuntz is here. Excellent, Rob. We're gonna pick on you because I feel like it. What do you mean tie together wellness initiatives? That doesn't make any sense. Like how does it tie together something, and why is that weird? Like what's the cocktail party version of not wasting time on that sort of thing? Because if I think about that, I'm just like, I want to tie together my initiatives. How do you tie an initiative?
It's very hard to conceptualize.
Yeah, like no one talks like that. Like you, Rob, we have gotten beers multiple times. You never say that. You never talk like that. I know because we've talked together a lot and you would never say that. So why put on your sales hat? Why not just sort of like speak about it, right? I'm not trying to make fun. You're an excellent marketer. And so I'm just pushing you on that one point. Are your step challenges conveying your HR goals, or are they something that lives by itself? Conveying your HR goals. Still, that's like, it's still kind of stilted. We still have our sales brain on, right? And then right above, what's the decision that you're struggling to make right now? What's your approach on better yet eliminating payment transaction fees? Right? Like this isn't how any of you talk when you get off work. Talk like you would when you've gotten off work. That's the advice here, right? And that's easier said than done. So let's
maybe if you have an example.
Yeah.
I think people, and this is why I wanted to do this, is I thought that people are kind of dancing around what their product does. They're asking questions around the product and what it does versus like going a layer higher, which I think is what you're proposing here, is that how can we talk a little bit more about the perspective on the industry and what this person's doing maybe right now, like their current state. What are they doing to solve this problem right now that is maybe not optimal compared to where they want to go?
And so I think one thing is going a bit slower, right? So like, let's not try to cover everything in your one question. Here's an example, and for your brief, this is somebody I've talked to before, but has not signed up. We've had one meeting like a year ago, and then here's the context. So setting the stage, he announced on LinkedIn that he's a founder who just hired a director of sales. To me, as a demand gen agency, this is a good sign. They're investing in growth. Cool. So how am I going to break that up? Am I going to be like, cool, is it now time to, have you ever thought about changing your demand generation? No. Director of sales, very grown up indeed. Good for you. Done. Stop. Don't say anything else. Wait. And then he says, yeah, we need to do something more in sales. So he's the next step. He's going to come later. Cool. I'm still not taking the bait. He's okay, cool. He's in charge of marketing. No, that's on my plate. All right, cool. That's good. I mean, you're making one step at a time. And here's one thing people are always afraid to do. They're afraid to distract. You're afraid to say anything that's not on your pitch because you don't want to like take anything away from the thing you're trying to sell. This is an insecurity. Because you're not confident that you'll be able to earn their attention. But for me, I'm just like, no. Like, yeah, no, I'm on the same boat. Like getting finance off my to-dos was ridiculous. And this is true. This has nothing to do with my value proposition. It's irrelevant, but it's nothing to do with sales. So don't be afraid to just sort of go slow. Don't take bait. Don't ask leading questions, and don't try to like drive people into a wedge to talk about your solution. And here we're just sort of, he wants to talk about having a COO. Great, I do too. Let's talk about that. I hired people this summer. It's a gamble to do so. If we succeed in cranking up sales, we're going to start at a normal pace again. Awesome. And he talks about cranking up sales. So here's where I'm going to bring it back to earth with what I'm going to do. And this is true. And this was true when I said it. It's a little more true now. Actually, we've grown more now. But so I'm just like talking about stuff related to the domain. Yeah, cool. That's awesome, man. Like people who are hiring now are gonna really pick up. We've grown a lot this year. We're producing more of our own SaaS. SEO is crushing it. It's producing a lot of the growth and new pipeline. This is Cocktail Party. I'm not sounding like a weirdo when I say this, right? This is just normal, the same mode as Alex outside of work as Alex in work. And so I'm just finishing my thought with this and saying, yeah, this is our organic traffic growth. Here's the gamble vote. He goes, that's insane. Interesting. Boom. Now, after a whole conversation, we finally got his attention on the thing that he's interested in, right? So see how it took me a while to get there? And I built up that credibility and defeated the skepticism by asking a couple questions. So cool, you hired a director of sales. Did you structure that role to have them own marketing too? That's the challenger question. That's the cocktail party question. That's not weird, and it lets him kind of open up about what he's got going on. And then he says, hope to match last year's revenue. Just like, yeah, we're doing more of this, blah blah blah. That's our COO. And now finally, he then consents to the conversation by saying, creating a lot of video content. How can we leverage that for lead gen? We have a lot of inbound call requests, but I've got more. So now I am allowed to sort of begin to pitch and ask clarifying questions that are leading, right? A leading clarifying question is me saying something that gets them to talk about the things that I sell. But look how many clarifying questions we asked before we got there. Look how I wasn't afraid to get off the subject matter for a moment to fill in the picture and the story of what I have and what he's doing so that we both can sort of join our stories in that way. And so what that takes is me listening actively to what he's literally saying and not just waiting for my chance to pitch. I see in the chat, a lot of people are like, any advice on when you apply on LinkedIn to get the prospect to ask for what you got without making it look like you only got in touch to pitch them? That's because you did only get in touch to pitch them. You need to change the way you think about that. And then the way you chat with people will change. And yeah, Kimberly just said people do business with people they like. That's true. But how do you get people to like you in a business sense? You just ask questions about the subject matter. So again, think about the subject matter as like the area that you work on. If you sell a particular insurtech product for onboarding new customers to an insurance agency, and you sell that to agency owners, generally talk about the act and problems of growing and running an insurance agency. And then when they kind of say interesting things about onboarding, then you can kind of like offer something up and see if they take it. If they don't take your offering, move on, right? So we talked earlier about gauging interest. If somebody gives you like a monosyllabic response to your leading question, you know that you don't have consent to move forward, right? You don't have the consent to keep talking about your product, because then they're just going to block you.
Yeah.
You have to wait till they have that little like, oh, cool, that's interesting. Never thought about that before. How'd you do that? And then you can slowly start getting it, but that's still not your opportunity to pitch.
So like what I gathered from that conversation, I think there's a lot of moving parts to it that we can kind of break down the structure for. But what I gathered from that is like, this is like truly like an instant chat type of experience versus like, I think a lot of people treat LinkedIn almost like email, where it's like, asynchronous communication. When LinkedIn is technically asynchronous, but it can feel like you're talking in the moment. And I think the experience is more like you talking to them in person over when you're doing it through LinkedIn than it is like emailing them. Can we dig into these, like a starter question that someone could ask? Because like for me, what works really well when I connect with anyone in sales development, I just say, hey, great to connect with you. What are you guys hearing from your prospects right now? Everyone's always got really strong opinions on what they're hearing from prospects, where they're running into challenges. And it's a question not about me and what we do. It's not related to pain points. And people volunteer a lot of pain points when I ask that type of question. So can we spend some time on that? Like, how do you come up with that kind of first question? And maybe we could look at some other examples, but how do we come up with that first question that kind of talks in general about what's going on in the industry versus digging into like, hey, do you have this pain point? Yes or no?
Yeah. I think that one of the main things to avoid is asking a question that obviously leads to your product, right? Like the most common thing people do is I'm just gonna make something up. I mean, let's say it's cybersecurity, and they're just like, great to connect with you, Jason. Have you noticed the increased amount of cyber attacks lately? Like, oh brother, here it comes, right? If you go like, oh brother, here it comes, that's the wrong question. And I don't know the questions for every industry. I only know mine, and they would be dependent a bit on like what I'm gonna look at the chat here. People moving their work from their homes, office homes, where possible.
Ooh, Lori asked, that's a pretty good one. I think it's a little long, but like I love this. Like it's asking for someone's opinion. I think that's actually an element of it. It sounds like is instead of asking something that's very logical, which when you ask about problems, they tend to be very logic based. When we do it in sales, it tends to be, are you guys hitting your quota? Do you have low response rates to your emails? Versus if I ask you, what are you hearing from prospects? Like you're going to tell me your opinion on what's going on. With Lori's question, do you think the internet generally can accommodate this shift? Like you're getting the person to weigh in on their opinion, which I think is pretty cool. I think you had some thoughts there and I cut you off.
Yes, and I like where you're going with that. So we're going to do a little copywriting rewrite of that, Lori. So people are moving their work from their offices to their homes since the pandemic. When I was in college poetry class, my professor would just write Titan next to a stanza, and he would like cut the fluff, right? Stop, take out any excess words. How can you say what you said without as many words? You could say, so people are moving their work from their offices to work from home. You could even abbreviate to say work from home. You wouldn't need to say where possible since the pandemic, because that's obvious, right? That we are in a pandemic that doesn't need to be restated. I would cut out all these extra hours. That doesn't add anything because like it's incredible. To whom? Why? What does that matter, right? What is the pain point? Are people wondering whether their workforce has the right internet connection to be productive? And are they thinking about how the increased bandwidth usage has changed? And here's the part where it's new information. Remember how we talked about asking questions that are new information? Remote work is not new. Using Zoom is not new. But thinking about a massive sudden change in work from home employee benefits and equipment in a scalable way to make sure that they're analyzing the rest of the home traffic as well as the work traffic. That's like, okay, I haven't thought about that. Yeah. What are we doing for that? Yeah. Okay. So how do we measure employee home connections? Can we even monitor their home bandwidth? I don't know. And now they're in this like, crap, I don't know the answer. And that's where you come and be like, yeah, I mean, that's something a lot of people are thinking about. We've seen people try this, and this. Have you tried doing it this way? Here's something people often use, right? Just like a little quick, don't give everything all at once, but ask a little type of question about like, have you thought about how, let me see, lately we're all moving to home offices. So do you think the internet can accommodate this shift is too general? The internet, like, of course the internet can. The internet is the internet, right? That's too big. What about like, have you thought about whether the, I don't know, internet plans as part of their benefits are, I don't know, have enough bandwidth to accommodate all of the traffic without losing productivity? That, I mean, I'm making stuff up based on not knowing your value prop, but like the internet, I'm going to pick it apart. Like the internet is too general. Maybe it's their internet plans you've equipped them with or something like that. But you're getting better, right? And you don't need to move all the way to the meeting question in one go. Like you just want to open up the conversation. Remember how long it took me to ask anything related to my value prop with Paul? Like just go slow. You don't need to go right to the meeting. So I would even think about a question that's earlier in the conversation to get them to think about that value prop more, right? Just to get them to think about whether they've considered how they equip employees with their internet connections in general, given that they're now kind of mixing connections. And just like stir the pot a little bit. Don't go right for the kill.
So what about something like this, Alex? I'm just throwing in ideas there into the chat. So people are moving their work from their offices to work from home. What do you think about how companies are equipping their employees for this shift?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I would even add a parenthetical here, equipping their employees and their
so we're kind of workshopping right now, you guys, which is this is very hard to do, and I'm totally putting Alex on the spot.
No, it's good.
By the way, so I want to give you some props. We didn't talk about workshopping this stuff, but I think what we're talking about is really important. It's like these kind of questions. It sounds like I don't have to have the perfect question that opens this up entirely, but I kind of need to have like a flow of how to get this conversation started, and I need to talk about something that is like around an area where they might have opinions on what's going on and how they're handling something.
Yeah, I got this. People doing Canada working for. I'm going to rephrase the question actually. I like giving them the opportunity to say no. So how about that, right? Of just like, are people doing okay now that they're all working from their personal or family internet connection setups, or has that not been much of an issue lately? Like, I want them to be like, no, it hasn't. I'm like, wait, is that true that it hasn't? I don't know. Maybe it kind of is. Right? So like equipping them with the ability to say no, which is very Chris Voss like, is helpful. Oh, I put that to just Rob Kuhns. My bad. Let me put that in the whole thing. Sorry, Rob, you're important too, but I'm gonna put that to everybody.
There we go.
And attendees. There we go. Cool. So like that, asking questions that let them say no as the response to is great, because then if they're not a good fit and they don't feel the pain point, they just be like, no, it's not an issue. And if it is at all, then they sort of like have to admit that it kind of is. And that's when you gauge interest, right? So
you're also allowing, Alex, in your question, what sticks out to me is like, it looks like you're allowing the person to kind of say that I might have a challenge in this area without me having to admit something really big, because I feel like a big problem with the problem-based, prospecting and selling is that if your goal is to get the person to admit that they have a problem, like that's like really, really hard to do, because most people aren't going to want to admit that they have a problem, which might be, I don't have my shit together. In this area, like people aren't going to admit that, and actually might put someone on the defensive. Versus the way that you've phrased this is like, how is that going? Is it going well? Is it, maybe this is not an issue for you? Like, what are your thoughts? It's very casual. It allows me to sort of enter in the conversation with you really easily and talk and open up about stuff.
Yeah. I want to bring up one question that Joelle asked about 20 minutes ago. I presume this is something insurance related. If I give the prospect some specific info, what is to prevent them from going to their current broker to ask for it? Nothing. Give people the information to squeeze their current vendor. Give people information that will let them not buy your product. Give people information that will turn down working with you. I love doing this. I love telling people just enough to do it on their own without needing to buy from us. And I'll tell them that. I'll be like, honestly, I don't know if you need us right now. Like, it sounds like you only have a little bit of an issue in this thing. What if you changed your tool so that the integration was set up this way? My goal is for them to be like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I don't even need this right now. But then what happens is they see you as the source of information. And that is when the magic happens. So yeah, if you sell insurance or health benefits, give people all that information. So if they give you any ounce of problem, try to help them solve it before selling them anything, because then they'll see you as someone who does that. If people see you as someone who solves problems without selling anything necessarily, and almost like your product is a last resort, versus any other more cumbersome solution, then they will trust you. And in this world where nobody listens to your pitch because they don't trust you, that's the biggest thing. And so many people's value props in the chat that you posted above before we asked for the what can you teach was just like very general. We help people improve their this. We help people win more sales. We help reduce cybersecurity attacks. So does everybody, right? The problem is trust. So do be very generous with what you know. Don't be afraid to give all the good stuff, because if buying from you is just a matter of knowing what you know, then why are you in the business of selling your own product? Why wouldn't you become a consultant, right? And what business do you have selling a new and unique product in this market? How do you justify being a founder or a leader or a salesperson in an industry where it's literally just about hoping they don't find out something? I mean, doesn't that sound weird? Where it's just like, I hope my prospect doesn't find out how they can get something better from their current vendor, so they switch to us. That's not cool. I imagine that's not the case with most people. You have something unique to offer. Give your prospects all the knowledge that they want so that they can make a decision to go with you or not in full confidence. That'll reduce churn. That'll lower your sales cycle. It'll increase your win rate. It'll do a lot of good things. And they'll also think of you very positively. And that reputation you have is what Justin Welsh has talked about in terms of personal brand, right? Like, that's the same word. Your reputation is what people know to expect from you. And if people know to expect that you are someone who will help them with their problems and tell them information without needing to sell to them right away, oh, that's powerful wherever you go. And you'll feel much better about your career and your job too.
Yeah, I like this because it's like if we're looking at kind of a bullseye, if in the middle is like the exact problem that your product or service helps with, you're talking about the things in and around that bullseye. Yeah. Right? How can I talk around before I need to get permission to talk about the stuff in the bullseye? Do you want to get to some of the questions? We've got some really good questions in here. Harrison Frickman asks, any tips to get more prospects to accept connection requests? So what should we be thinking about when we send a connection request to someone?
It's actually before that. So I would say the best thing is to have a profile that is worth connecting with. So I'm going to soapbox on content for a bit, but also profile design. So most people have a title and a headline that's just like SDR at company or something, right? It's just not, even if it's like, founder, like founder, CEO at XYZ. Nobody knows what that is, unless your company name is very descriptive or has an excellent brand reputation, which, hopefully you can take marketing for that. Try to cover your bases of have a photo where you're not looking mean or bored. Have a backing image that's either branded or something you like. I had Yosemite on mine for a long time, then I made a custom one. Cool. Have a headline that says what you do and who you help with what, not just your title. Have an about section that expands on that and tells a story. And then post content that isn't just company blogs. Look at this. What are we doing right now? posting content about think outside the script. But the post content that's a combination of like, here's some stuff I'm doing. Here's who we're hiring. Here's how to do your job better. And one thing you can even do is you can, I'll put a sample connect request in the comments that you could steal if you want based on writing a post comment. So you could say, actually, I'll do it with my screen share just so you can see me write it out. So let's say I want to use this one. And I say, I'm going to copy a link to this post. And let's say I'm writing to, what's a good for this one? This is probably, heading to VPs of sales. So let's say this, hey, Jason, qualify your statements. Here's another tip. Never say always guaranteed, ultra confident. I write fairly often, figured we can connect here. Just like qualify your statements down to like even a weaker version of them. They're more believable that way and they're more true. So always do the thing that's more believable and true. That's just a win-win. And then you use a, so I'll just show you, you can use Bitly to shorten your links down here. And then see, I've taken my link to my post and I've shortened it down, go away, to this Bitly link here. So it's shorter and it fits in my connection request.
Oh, so you dropped something in there. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so you can take your post and then this expands as a little preview in the chat box. So they can actually see the first few lines of it to be like, oh, is this person legit? Notice that I have not anywhere mentioned what I do as a company. I have not said what I sell. I've only said that I am like you in some ways. I have some relevant experience, insert whatever relevant thing it is. Some low friction ask, and a reason why I'm credible. You can see if I'm credible or not. Do you agree or does my post interest you? And then, so remember how I said go slow? Don't go from intro to pitch all at once. This is what people mean when they say build a relationship. They don't actually mean talk about random stuff outside of the business. They mean go slower to the point at which you ask for the next step. That's what people mean when they say build a relationship, is they mean like talk about the subject matter in a way that doesn't go straight for the jugular right off the bat. Now, that's not to say that going right for the kill won't ever work. It often does. That's why people do it. But if you're going to do this thoughtfully and spend the time with it, you're going to have a far better success rate by going slower like this. And this is not the only example, but it's one example where you can get a lot of new accepted connections and opportunities to build relationships without needing to just pitch or even mention your product at all.
And if our company is writing content and we're not, we could also drop company content in there if it's good, right?
You can. And so here's the big thing about company content. Most people make the mistake of sharing company blog posts and company posts. It doesn't do anything for you. Whenever you share somebody else's asset, whether it's a link or something else, add your own take. I shared the think outside the script thing, and I made it a little bit like funnier, right? Not that this is cool, right? But I didn't just post the image and be like, sign up today. I was like, here's some stuff. Here's some more stuff. Here's kind of like a little tongue-in-cheek thing. Here's, some people are in New Zealand. Great, you weren't expecting that. And then there's this thing. Same thing with a company blog post. If your company produces a blog post that you really want to share, put the link in the comments and then have this post be your take on why it's interesting. So always add your own, Denise says, could you follow up with how to add the Bitly post? Just copy a link to your post, go to this site, and then click the shortened link and it'll do it for you. But yeah, like always add your own context. Don't just parrot somebody else's stuff and then not do anything. And that's how to make yourself worth connecting with and how to use your credibility based on what you put in your profile to make connection with someone. And I'm at the point where I can just send any connection request to people that are in my industry and they'll usually know me. So I don't need to be very interesting. So it does take time to build up. you can't just go from 0 to 100 and earn that. But at first, I was very focused on adding lots of value with my connection requests. And add value meaning be interesting, have something to say. The easiest thing you can do if you're in sales or a founder or somehow in business development is reference very close peers. If you do marketing for technology MSPs, connect with the other MSPs that are in the towns just over and mention casually that you work with them. So here's an example, right? This gentleman connected with me, and it's not showing for some reason, but his connection request note puts it's an incoming pitch for his CPA services. But I noticed he used to work at a customer of ours. So I just said, hey, go to Connect. They're a customer of ours. And he was like, really? I don't even need to say much else, because then I've done my whole job here. By saying this, he's inferring that we know our stuff, that we're credible. He's inferring all that. So if Blissful Prospecting was a customer of ours, I might go to, like a non-competitive, similar training and coaching company. And they go, oh, that's cool. They're good to connect. So we work with Blissful Prospecting. They do what you do, but in sales. I know you guys do, copywriting training. Like, really? So small training companies that work with growing, startups? Interesting. And they're going to infer all that stuff. Here's one. This is an old one, but I hit up Wasim at Pilot, which is an accounting and tax services and software company. And I used to work at Indinero, which was their larger competitor. So I just was like, hey, I was there for this 2-year period. Would be good to chat with you. This is super general, but this is the thing that's getting him going. So if you're a salesperson, look at your territory, look at the customers in your territory, look at the ones that are nearby, like nearby isn't very relevant, and just don't be overly thirsty and just drop those names. Like, okay, that's cool. It's good to connect with you. Like, we're working with these folks. Don't even need to say how or why.
Yeah.
Right. And that creates the intrigue of like, why are they not telling me how they pitched this company? Oh, interesting. What do they know? What can I learn from this? And then you're creating this like magnetism.
Yeah, it's like give the prospect a chance to be a little curious. And one hack I think that's just so easy to do that people don't do very often for some reason is if you look at all the companies that you like your current company works with, or that people have case studies of, if you go in Sales Navigator and put those companies into the past company search box, you can search for people that used to work at a company that's a current client of yours. And you can do the same approach. Hey, notice you used to work at so-and-so. They're actually a client of ours. Great to connect. And then that person's like, oh, interesting, right? Yeah. So there's already some credibility there. That's a really easy one. I got another quick question for you because Jerry Kleeman and Alex Lagana are, and I've seen a couple people ask something similar. When you're chatting with people, are you looking for them to be online? Do you do it at a particular time? Do you reach out regardless of if they're online or not? Like, how do you think about that? Like the when component of like when to send the message?
It's a good question. Maybe there is some data around, well, I mean, obviously if someone's online, they're more likely to respond. Yeah. But for me, it's more about when I'm online because I'm optimizing for my time and it's asynchronous, right? Like the point of it, I don't need them to be online. So I'm just going to drop a message in their inbox. And if it's interesting, they'll respond. Mm-hmm. I think you will get a better response if they're online because as with anything, like knocking on someone's door and having them be there, you'll talk to them more than like dropping a letter, right? But think also about the operational inefficiency of like monitoring when they are or aren't online and how much brain space they have. And just like you have to optimize for your time too. And think whenever you're doing something, think about is this going to be neutral, positive, or a detractor for my prospect? If it's neutral or positive, and you have any positive benefit in time savings or whatever it is, do the thing. Don't do things that have massive reduction in efficiency for you and neutral to mildly positive benefit for your prospects. It's just not worth it. Yeah. And that touches on the like, how do you balance personalization with high volume outreach? You shouldn't need to do high volume outreach unless your deal size is very, very low. So avoid doing high volume outreach. Yep. Is the answer to that question. And then you can if you take my approach of going slow, you'll have like, well, and also if you produce content and you comment on other people's stuff, you'll end up having like 3 to 5 really good conversations a day, many of which turn into opportunities, which will reduce the need for high volume outreach. Otherwise, you do high volume outreach, your conversion rate is low, you burn through your target market, you have fewer conversations, and now you're keeping yourself on this hamster wheel of, I have to do more and more volume to keep my pipeline full,
Yeah.
which will just, I've built teams that had to make this mistake because I've ran sales at a company where sort of customer support and so forth were intentionally hiring just behind demand. So they would always be like, to try to save money, like a little bit understaffed. And so the brand equity kind of diminished over time. And so we had to build an SDR team just to put more leads in the pipeline because the inbound started to go down. So ideally, you should wean yourself off high volume outreach to try to avoid the need for that by doing this. The problem is if you don't do this and you do low volume outreach, then you have the worst of both worlds and it won't help. So you do have to strike that balance.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. Dude, we're out of time. This is like fully by. I appreciate you going into like kind of workshop style. That was something that was unplanned, unrehearsed. So hopefully you guys got some value from it. Before you take off, man, like where do you want people to go to connect with you? And I'll drop in your LinkedIn profile here. Let's blow up Alex's LinkedIn. Go connect with him. Yeah, let's send him a good connection request too. Okay. But where can people go to connect with you, man? I learned from you and all that good stuff.
That really is it. Like true to form, I'll just say like slide in my DMs. You don't have to be particularly interesting. You are welcome to pitch me stuff if you think it'll benefit. But if you do, follow this. Yeah, just connect on LinkedIn and we'll chat there or, stay in touch for the future.
Yeah, definitely check out their stuff. They're putting a lot of great content out at Revenue Zen as well. And my one ask at the end of all of these is the replay is going up later tonight. If you got value from this, like share it with one person. So if there's one person on your team, a friend in sales, your manager, whoever it might be, the owner of the company, if you guys are running a smaller company, send it over to them. Yeah. Claire says that she's sharing this with her entire team. That's awesome, Claire. And then make sure to tune in tomorrow. We have Andrea Waltz coming on talking about Go for No. How to handle rejection and mindsets around that. And then we have Seth List from Predictable Revenue on Thursday talking about sequencing design. So we got a couple more really awesome talks coming up. But Alex, dude, I appreciate your time so much, man.
Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Cool. All right, everyone. Thank you. We'll see you. Have a good one.